Welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, climb aboard the fast track debate. Two views on a hemispheric trade agreement sought by President Clinton. That's on Coffee House Forum. Ever hear of cohousing? This unique model of residential community debuts in Takoma, D.C. On Body and Soul, Montgomery County's shot at being the big shot in East Coast youth soccer. Then Whammy Award winner Magpie shares its brand of topical music on musical traditions. DJ Renegade offers a poem to Morna, plus Justice Thurgood Marshall's biographer, Ron Williams, joins us for Writer's Block. All that and more. Hi, and welcome to the Coffee House. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. No issue better illustrates Mark Twain's three categories of lies than the debate over trade. Free trade supporters cite numbers purporting to prove that trade agreements like NAFTA have added tens of thousands of jobs to the U.S. economy and stimulated an even bigger boom south of the Rio Grande. But free trade critics point to plant shutdowns in the U.S. and movement of once high-paying manufacturing jobs to Mexico, a country they say is still digging out from a draconian peso devaluation, in part driven by NAFTA. NAFTA's been with us since 1994, but there's still no agreement about what the real job numbers are or what they mean. It's not an academic question. President Clinton wants to extend a NAFTA-like trade agreement throughout the Western Hemisphere by the year 2005. In his State of the Union address, he asked Congress for fast-track authority to allow him to negotiate a hemispheric trade treaty that Congress would then have to vote up or down without any amendments. We have two guests tonight. Lance Compa is a longtime labor side lawyer, Tacoma resident, and now a professor at Cornell's School of Industrial and Labor Relations. He says it's time to give fast track a chance. Michael Dolan is with Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, the group that led the successful fight against fast track authority last year. Welcome both of you to the Coffee House. Michael Dolan, why not give the president the authority to negotiate a trade treaty for the hemisphere and then let Congress vote up or down on it?
Up or down. Fast track, you have to understand, is first of all just the proper name of one form of delegation, of negotiating authority that the Congress can give to the executive branch. Under the Constitution, as you know, Mark, Congress is invested with the exclusive authority to regulate foreign commerce. The President, the executive branch, has the authority to relate to foreign sovereigns. It's part of the checks and balances under our Constitution that no single area of important policy, in this case trade, globalization debates that now characterize the debate in the Congress, be left to one or the other of the houses. Now,
is your problem with fast track that it somehow is a process problem, or
it's absolutely a process problem, absolutely, and it needs to be unpacked. It is in fact three delegations at once to the executive branch. From my perspective, it is an abdication of constitutional responsibility from the legislative to the executive branch. And the values that Lance and I share in terms of labor rights and environmental rights and the upward harmonization of standards will never be achieved under the current so-called fast track. If we unpack those delegations and give the Congress greater oversight and accountability over the process and give the citizens of this country a greater accountability over that process and over the negotiators, we will be able to achieve some of the things that Lance and I both hope will characterize future trade agreements.
If you seem to agree on the substance of what should be in a trade agreement, why do you disagree about fast track?
Well, I think that it is a question of form over substance. I think that as a general principle, the president, being elected by all the people, is probably in the best position to negotiate the best deal that balances all the interests. And I don't think that Congress creating the parameters of negotiation through a fast-track authorizing bill and then having the power to vote up or down on the results is giving up that much. The question always is the results. And I think that Michael and Citizens Trade Watch and the labor movement generally correctly stopped fast track in its tracks in 1997 and 1998 because it was not effective in addressing labor, environmental, and other human rights social dimension issues.
All right. Let's look a little bit at the substance of that. What's the problem that you both saw with NAFTA, with Fast Track in the past? Why do you still think it's a problem? Or why do you now think that it's something we can move ahead on?
Fast Track has only been used 5 times. Created in 1974 in the Nixon administration. It was used on 3 fairly obscure trade agreements, back when trade agreements were mostly about tariffs and quotas. Trade agreements since the explosion that was created by NAFTA and the GATT, which gave us the World Trade Organization, now involve many more issues than the strictly economic sort of tariff-based relations which animated the original trade agreements under Fast Track. Now, issues such as labor and environmental issues and food safety and truck safety, which require changes in U.S. law, long implementing legislation, which, as you know, is only voted up or down by both houses of Congress. These things are beginning to affect other areas of American commerce with foreign countries that, as I say, require that U.S. law be changed. Now, that's an earmark.
For the better or for the worse?
My feeling, and I imagine that Lance may agree with me, that probably for the worse. There's a downward harmonization of labor and environmental, consumer, food safety, and other kinds of standards under agreements like NAFTA, like the GATT. All we're really actually,
Is it true, though, for Mexico? Is the harmonization upward or downward in Mexico? Maybe it's downward in the U.S. and upward in Mexico.
Lance?
I think that, in fact, Mexican wages and working conditions have deteriorated. The problem is, I think it would be as wrong to say that they've deteriorated because of NAFTA as it would be to say that U.S. unemployment is at a record low level since NAFTA went into effect or because of NAFTA. I think there's a real disconnect there. And I think this is probably where we might diverge in our opinions. I think NAFTA is much overblown as a terrible thing. And the test that I would offer is, what would be different if NAFTA had been defeated in 1993? And I really don't think much would be different. The Mexican peso would have been devaluated. The effects of that on the economy would be pretty much what we see now. And I'm just fearful of all of the energies of our progressive trade critical movement being put into stopping trade agreements when the underlying issues of globalization and capital movement are not being adequately addressed.
Marginal impact, NAFTA?
Well, I actually believe that NAFTA has failed to live up to its advanced promises at every level of detail. And I also believe that NAFTA cannot pass a simple do no further harm test. When you look at children in Michigan eating strawberries that were not inspected because of the lowering of our inspection standards, they contract hepatitis. When you look at the ways in which we're going to allow Mexican trucks, for example, to come in unsafe by American standards, plus the at least 250,000 U.S. jobs, good manufacturing jobs that have been lost since NAFTA, as certified by the Department of Labor.
Because of NAFTA?
Certified by the Department of Labor as having lost their jobs because of NAFTA. The movement of production, which you described in the introduction, of manufacturing jobs to lower wage areas.
But would that not have happened regardless?
It was accelerated by NAFTA. The problem with NAFTA, which I think returns us to the procedural question, is that the NAFTA requires a change in U.S. laws, banking and finance and food and consumer and safety, changes in positive U.S. law. Implementing language, which is drafted by the administration under fast-track procedures, goes to Capitol Hill where there is limited debate, 30 hours, no amendments are allowed, and the Congress gets to vote up or down. This is not what the framers of the United States Constitution intended for a mechanism to regulate foreign commerce. And we've gone off that track, and we need to return to it and give the Congress a greater role.
A couple of disagreements, I think, surface here, and these are the kind of things we need to hash out, you know. The 250,000 jobs, that's the number of workers who have been certified as eligible for special NAFTA trade adjustment assistance because their firms have been affected by trade with Canada and Mexico. Not necessarily NAFTA-related trade, although in most respects, trade with Canada and Mexico is now under NAFTA. But we were trading with Canada and Mexico already. Many of those workers, the numbers are actually kind of obscure, but many of those workers did not lose their jobs. They simply work at firms where the entire workforce, including managers and supervisors, were certified as eligible for NAFTA benefits. Something less than, far less than 10% of that number of workers certified ever actually received NAFTA trade adjustment assistance benefits. And I think, frankly, it's because most of them went out and got another job. You know, we have to be honest that there is a very low unemployment in the United States now. That doesn't mean that the business cycle has been repealed and we're not going to return to higher levels of unemployment. But, you know, I just don't think that NAFTA has had this overwhelming effect that has been attributed to it.
We have a Republican Congress right now. In fact, Senator Phil Gramm has introduced a bill very recently in support of fast-track authority for the president, but expressly barring the president from negotiating an agreement that includes labor and environmental standards. Why not, from your perspective, say no to fast-track again this year, no to fast-track until the 2000 elections, when a new Congress will be elected and the pollsters suggest that there should be a Democratic majority then, or maybe?
I think that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, I would remain absolutely opposed to a Republican-sponsored fast-track bill which rejects the idea of labor and environmental and other social conditions. But I would be prepared, under the right circumstances, to support a fast-track bill that adequately addresses those issues, and the fight then becomes what's adequate. I frankly think that the NAFTA labor agreement, which was set up under the NAFTA side agreements on labor and the environment, is not a bad starting point. I've been intimately involved in several of the cases that have arisen under the NAFTA labor agreement, and it's led to an unprecedented level of cooperation and communication and solidarity among trade unionists and working people in the three countries that never would have happened without this side agreement on labor.
Michael Dolan.
Well, side agreement, I mean, that just sort of says it all. I mean, I think that what our goal is to make sure that labor rights and environmental issues as well are in the core text of these trade agreements. A lot of people outside of trade lawyer circles don't realize that the 1988 grant of fast track, the original grant of fast track that Bill Clinton inherited from George Bush, included among its negotiating objectives, and I have to say that Lance's analysis depends on negotiating objectives that are written in. I don't think it's adequate, because the negotiating objectives of the original fast track included tying trade sanctions and market access to the U.S. import market to labor rights. It's completely ignored in the 1994 negotiations of the GATT, which gave us the WTO. On the contrary, and I think this is the real issue. I don't want to debate about job loss under NAFTA. It's a debate Lance and I have been having for years now. The crucial point that needs to be realized as a political matter is that it is illogical for the U.S. Congress to abdicate its responsibilities under the Constitution to the executive branch in an increasingly globalized economy. We are going to be determining the premises and the directions of the U.S. participation in the global economy, and the Congress needs to maintain control of that process and not give it away to the president.
Word, I'm afraid. Thanks to Michael Dolan from Global Trade Watch and Lance Compa from Cornell for joining us in the coffee house. Coming up, will Montgomery County be the East Coast capital for youth soccer? Plus, author Juan Williams discusses the life and legacy of Justice Thurgood Marshall, and DJ Renegade offers up a poem. But first, just what is cohousing? Ross Adams has an answer.
Vacant lot in Takoma, D.C. is about to undergo a huge transformation. Plans are underway to construct a cohousing unit, a type of condo dwelling designed to give residents a sense of community. But just how different is cohousing from standard condos?
The difference is that cohousing actually establishes relationships among people very early on. So we have a way, we would come to meetings on whether or not to have dogs in the common house from a different place, more of a supportive environment rather than an adversarial one.
Common resources and participate in the design of the facility.
But with cohousing, what happens is the developer can work and the architect can work with the group and build a much more custom, targeted kind of design for the community itself. So when you move into your house, it's a house that you've helped create and it's a community you've helped create.
That creation may include not only 2 to 3 bedroom townhouses, but a community building and a village green. These amenities make cohousing unique when compared to standard housing.
There's a positive movement toward trying to get connected with other people.
Cohousing began in Denmark in the late 60s. It spread to North America in the late 1980s and is mostly concentrated in California.
Using recycled materials or getting lumber from sustainable forests or passive solar design or even active solar design.
This 1.4-acre lot that you see here will be the home of Takoma Village, the first urban co-housing community to be constructed in the D.C. area. When it's completed, it will contain 44 units. And many folks are interested in this kind of living.
And I'm also a paid co-housing consultant on the project.
Some of those folks recently attended a meeting to learn more about co-housing. Stephen Rosenberg was one of them. He and his wife are planning to buy a house. Rosenberg is interested in co-housing, but he does have some concerns.
We're living the way we would have never lived, which is in a townhouse situation. So we're considering something we would have never considered if we were just buying on our own.
Cindy Cohen lives in an apartment. She likes what co-housing has to offer when compared to her present living situation.
So I'd like to have more contact with my neighbors, and I also like that in co-housing, that there's the shared resources and sort of the environmental type of emphasis.
Nearby homes in Takoma have been here for decades. The new co-housing community could potentially bring new life to this struggling urban area.
I really see co-housing as a way to get people to communicate together, to build strong communities, to be a leading edge in urban revitalization, which is really the passion of mine, is to just revitalize these wonderful urban cities that we have. And I see co-housing as the way to do that.
Co-housing units are built at market rate, so the cost is no cheaper than conventional homes. But residents may be able to cut costs by sharing regular meals in a common area, although they're not required to do so. For the Coffee House, I'm Ross Adams.
Hi and welcome to Body and Soul. Montgomery County gets a lot of mention in national magazines as a nice place to live, but when you stop and think about it, this is still a place without a fixed identity. No one ever pulls out a map and says, oh yeah, Montgomery County, that's where such and such happens. No one calls Montgomery County the capital of this or the capital of that. But guess what? Change is afoot. You may soon be calling Montgomery County the soccer capital of the East Coast. Here in the studio to tell us more is Trisha Heffelfinger, a spokeswoman for the Maryland Youth Soccer Association, and an official with the, and Linda Schugar, hi Linda, who is with Montgomery Soccer, Inc., one of the great leagues of in the country, I should say, the biggest in the county and one of the biggest in the United States. Well, the Maryland Soccer Foundation, in fact, is what you're a spokesperson for, and which is an unusual creation, part private, part public. And you have this grand idea, or the foundation does, a soccer complex, now called a Soccerplex, I guess. So let's start with where it will be, what it will look like, and just how wonderful you imagine it to be.
It'll be actually in South Germantown Recreational Park, which is up in Germantown, Maryland. It'll have 24 soccer fields.
How close to 270?
It's about 3 or 4 miles off of 270.
Okay.
You'll go down 118 and then cut across a new road that will be there. So it's a great road network to get to it. And it will have the 24 soccer fields, which will include a championship field with bleacher seating for 3,200 people, and an indoor soccer complex that'll have 2 fields that'll be used for soccer and indoor lacrosse, and basketball and volleyball and inline hockey. So it'll be a tremendous amenity for the whole county.
So I brag that it's going to be the biggest on the East Coast. Is that
No,
safe
there's
to say?
actually...
No, oh, you don't. Don't tell me that.
It's going to be close.
Just say it's close.
It's close. It's very close.
Right.
We're working on
It'll
that.
be the best on the East Coast.
All right, the
right.
newest, certainly. Now, Montgomery Soccer, Inc., MSI, Linda, is a driving force here behind this. What are the arguments? What benefits come to you?
Well, first of all, anybody benefits by this because it's a park for youth. And obviously, Montgomery soccer is a big chunk of it, but there are 22,000 youth soccer players in Montgomery County. And our biggest problem is where everybody can play. Right. And so anytime there's an opportunity to increase the playing fields, we're ready. But by having an opportunity to have a complex of this size opens up the benefit to our youth, because we can host tournaments and other activities, and even with the stadium size complex, the possibility for semi-pro players to come in and use the field. And so that then elevates the level of play.
So there's an actual stadium there where...
Right, it will be, a 3,200.
It's like if you think of a high school football stadium, that's about the size of it. Blair High School would be the equivalent.
And so it'll hold a decent crowd.
But you see, our youth players in the county are playing, and this would be a chance for them to see other people, other teams coming in from other communities. Right. If we host tournaments, which we intend to do at this, so the opportunity is there to bring into the community more competitive soccer.
Right, but also primarily it is for kids of Montgomery County, 24 fields, above and beyond what they have now.
Oh, it's absolutely. Yeah. But I mean, it's more that it enhances the whole aspect of soccer in all phases. It gives us additional playing space. It gives us opportunities that don't exist now because we don't have any kind of facility that's even tantamount to this.
Right. It's also, these are going to be high quality fields. These are some of the best fields that you'll have. Highly maintained, safe fields. And just think of the atmosphere of kids who might be 7 or 8 playing next to kids who are 14 and 15, and just that whole festive atmosphere every weekend.
And it's paid for mostly private money, some public money.
It's a public-private partnership. The foundation is a nonprofit, and we will be raising about $12 million for the soccer fields and the indoor and the championship field. And then the public money will go for infrastructure for the park as a whole. This park will have an aquatic center, a tennis center, a central park, a driving range. It's really going to be a special place.
Okay, and March the 2nd, this has been approved by the Planning Commission.
Right.
Now March the 2nd, there'll be a public hearing prior to a county council vote. You're going to testify, Linda, obviously in favor of it. There's some opposition. The neighbors
everybody always has that NIMBY attitude, not in my backyard.
Right, that's right. They're going to invade their peace and quiet. And that's sort of predictable. That usually is not persuasive with the council. Are there other arguments that will be raised that are...
Well, there's always been the traffic issue, because nobody wants an influx, an infusion of traffic. And they sometimes talk about this like it's going to be the Super Bowl every weekend, and it's certainly not at that level. And I mean, the egresses are timed because you can only have so many people playing at different times, so that really is not an issue. I think the biggest issue at this point is, of course, this public-private partnership is a new concept for Montgomery County, and I think it's probably going to be a test case for future endeavors. I mean, the longest time the county had land, but they had no way to develop, so.
Well, the maintenance cost, which I understand will be large, what, $2 million a year, the hope is that you'll be able to raise money with the indoor facility to finance most of the maintenance costs?
The revenues from the indoor facility are geared towards paying for the outdoor fields. That's the whole idea. And the outdoor fields, the operating cost for the whole complex is under $2 million, yeah. Yeah.
And so, in environmental concerns, I know there were some raised in front of the Planning Commission. Have they been fully addressed now?
Yeah, we've really addressed those completely. One of the biggest concerns was that we might be using groundwater for irrigation. That's been taken off the table, and the whole irrigation will be done by WSSC water. So that really added a lot of comfort to the local residents.
Groundbreaking. If all goes well, how soon?
Next summer.
Next summer.
Next summer. If all goes well, we'll open fall of 2000. That's our goal.
Fall of 2000.
For the 2000 series.
It's the Millennium Soccer.
That's right. That's our plan.
Right. So are you gonna sell off the rights?
We'd sell
to the,
your
to the
mother
name?
if we could.
You want to name something, we've got it for you.
Well, now you're charging most kids who currently play $10 a
We're
season.
assessing. We're
You're
assessing.
them,
Okay.
assessing them, and so they'll buy into.
This is a benefit
right,
to it, and
right.
each of the clubs are doing
Right.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so most everyone is going to be allowed to play, and if you're not being assessed now, you'd have an opportunity to pay a fee and get to play anyway. So it's
But
open.
the big clubs are participating
Right.
in this. and-
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I think it's unprecedented. You've got the soccer community behind this. They're putting in $2 million of the $12 million will come from the soccer community.
From the families
players.
of the soccer, from the moms and dads,
That's
us
right.
soccer
Well, and
moms
it's
and
also
dads.
nice because I think from a standpoint, you feel you have a vested interest in
Right.
it and you've participated in it. And there's other activities where they will be part and parcel to the whole complex. It's not going to be something ethereal out there that they can't attain. I mean, they hopefully will all participate, have an opportunity to play on it, and observe other, teams playing on it and use it. I mean, it's not meant to be not used as a showcase. It's meant to be used on a regular basis.
Okay, so this, the thing that I've always talked about is that what soccer needs is the equivalent of the opening day, the pitch. Vice President Gore out there throwing out the first pitch. So
Kick.
That's
so everyone, you say if you don't have anything some ritual. Can we start one here and now that we could?
Well, actually, we
use?
are with the use with the advent of professional soccer here. We are developing our own soccer heroes, and there are a few in this area. So I'm sure that the plans will be underway.
So a secret guest might start with
That's right.
his first name may start Mario, although it probably won't be Howard. However, thank you for being here. I am Howard Cohen, and we'll leave it at that. This has been Body and Soul. Thank you very much.
within your arms. A summer night's magic enthralling me so. The night would be tragic if you weren't here to share it, my dear. Covered with heaven above, let's dream a dream of love for two, wrapped in the arms of sweet romance, under a blanket of blue.
under a blanket of blue. Just you and I beneath the stars, wrapped in the arms of sweet romance. The night is ours under a blanket of blue. Let me be thrilled by all your charms. Darling, I know my heart will dance within your arms. A summer night's magic enthralling me so. The night would be tragic if you weren't here to share it, my dear. Covered with heaven above, let's dream a dream of love for two, wrapped in the arms of sweet romance, under a blanket of blue.
Well, that was wonderful.
Thanks, David.
I'd like to welcome Magpie to the musical traditions segment of Takoma Coffee House. What was the name of that tune?
Under a blanket of blue.
Well, yes, you did set me up on that.
Yes, we did.
Well, let's say, unlike recent trends in public radio where they keep taking the music off and more talk,
right,
we're going to do less talk and have more songs.
Okay. Great. So, we like that.
All right. So, being true to my word, I'm going to jump right off and let you go into another tune. What are you going to play?
Well, I'll have to get my guitar. Greg will tell you.
Okay. Well, we'll fill now.
This is a song...
this is why talk radio is doing this. Yeah.
This is a song written by a friend of ours by the name of Peggy Ayers from up in Selkirk, New York, and it's a song called Mary Brown, Abolitionist. It tells a little bit of the story of John Brown, the abolitionist, but from the point of view of his wife, Mary, whose story has been mostly untold through the years, and the song is based on letters that she wrote to him when he was in jail awaiting execution.
Aha. Okay, take it away.
November 1st, 1859. Dear John, affectionate husband of mine, Mr. Higginson, the newsman came today. I regretfully heard what he had to say. He told me of the trial your righteousness denied. He formed an escort, I will be there by your side. Before they hang you, we will have time to share our plan to bring you home and one final prayer.
We may not see the slaves go free, neither did Moses reach the promised land. Still none could be more blessed than we who are an instrument in God's hand. All along we knew our plan would have its risk. Still I prayed your fate would not come to this. If you had fallen beside our two brave sons, your words of freedom could not do what they have done. Oliver and Watson made their sacrifice. Harper's Ferry battle exacted its price. Soldiers for our cause could not be bought or found. Our sons and daughters by faith our duty bound. We may not see the slaves go free, neither did Moses reach the promised land. Still none could be more blessed than we who are an instrument in God's hand. North Elba, we women carry on. All are making ready so that I might leave at dawn. Oliver's widow has a fever running wild. I doubt the future of her unborn child. Sarah and Ellen, it seems, are middling well. They did not shrink from the news I had to tell. I know that they will miss your presence in their lives. Your love and faithfulness in them are burning bright.
We may not live to see the slaves go free, neither did Moses reach the promised land. Still none could be more blessed than we who are an instrument in God's hand.
Your loving wife, Mary.
Does tell an amazing story, doesn't it?
It does.
How long have you guys been playing together?
25 years.
Yep,
25
that's right.
years.
We're in our 25th year now.
Well,
and you have a dual career in the sense that not only do you do, I guess we'd call it adult music, but you also do a lot of work, children's music.
Oh, you bet.
Kids, yeah.
How many
all ages.
How many recordings, when you total the children's side and the adult side?
Well, there's about 7 of them now, but we're approaching more than that.
7 with the 8th
And
the
the
9th
on its
their
way.
way.
A unique situation, yes.
Yes.
And then we're also on a number of compilations.
Oh,
so,
yes.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, take us out with one. What are you going to do?
Well,
We Belong to the Earth, one of our own songs.
Okay.
And
we'll fill
one of the many songs that we've done that deal with environmental themes.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
We belong to the earth. We all belong to the earth. It's not that she belongs to us. It's we belong to her. We belong to her. A strand in a web are we. A strand in a web I believe. To own it we cannot dare to dream. It's a web that we didn't weave. It's a web that we didn't weave. We belong to the earth. We all belong to the earth. It's not that she belongs to us. It's we belong to her. We belong to her. In sun and in wind and in rain, there's a seed of what will be. It awakens a power that grows down below. It courses through you and through me. It courses through you and through me. And we belong to the earth. We all belong to the earth. It's not that she belongs to us. It's we belong to her. We belong to her. And when our spirits take flight, we lay our bodies down. Our ashes may be carried away on the wind, but return to the birthing ground. Return to the birthing ground. We belong to the earth. We all belong to the earth. It's not that she belongs to us. It's
Still ahead, author Juan Williams on Writer's Block, but first...
Morna. Every night, I dive into a dream deep as the sea around Saint Vicent. I'm in love with a woman who leaves footprints in the sand of my dreams. A woman bold as Badillo de Santiago, with eyes green as the trees of Santo Antão, hair black as the beaches of Fogo, breasts brown as the hills of San Nicolau. A woman wearing a dress white as sal, neat as the streets of Mayo. Her mouth round as Boa Vista, legs slender as Santa Luzia, feet tiny as Bravo. In the dream, I lie on her beach while the white lips of waves lick my legs with water warm as fresh milk. Palm trees dance in the breeze as an airplane sews a white thread across the sky's blue silk. Her Creole tongue is sweet as sugarcane. I press it between my lips. My heart skips quick as a coladera. The Atlantic hisses like a jealous hag, insists these islands are only 10 pimples on a vast face. But these are West Africa's fingertips reaching towards America, reaching for me. Tonight, the moon is silver as the side of a tuna. An evil eye, it curses me with a lunacy tireless as the tide. A question glides through my mind like a seagull. Will I ever see her face? My pen plows crooked lines across a barren page. I stack these green stanzas into a terrace on the hillside of hope. I love a woman I only see in dreams. The branches of all the trees point in the direction of her passing. Listen to these breakers of blood crashing across the rock of my heart. An ancient proverb says, love is a market with as many women as the ocean has waves. But my grandmother says, love is stronger than grog, what can convince you to build a house in a volcano's mouth. I am a burro, nightly circling the same sorry path, in love with a woman I've only seen in dreams. I wake suddenly, my heart pounding like a pilon. I glance down. She has left the word chuba glistening on my lips like a kiss.
Welcome to Writer's Block. As we celebrate Black History Month, I'm always a tad conflicted. I'm happy to see familiar faces, and the month of February is full of images of Rosa Parks and the bus boycott, the civil rights movement, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, familiar icons for all of us. Yet the larger picture of civil rights today is so rarely discussed, as if we as Black people had all our problems solved a long time ago. Never mind that issues like affirmative action are still controversial, that certain areas of our lives are still very much in flux. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X did contribute to the enormous changes this country has seen, and their effect was revolutionary. But there was a third revolutionary working behind the scenes, and in his role as first Black Justice of the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall made an incredible impact on the judicial system in the area of civil rights. His influence changed the face of America for good, and his life and times are depicted in the extraordinary book, Thurgood Marshall, American Revolutionary, by Juan Williams, who is my guest tonight. Juan Williams has been a political analyst and national correspondent for the Washington Post for 21 years. He has won an Emmy Award for documentary writing and is the best-selling author of Eyes on the Prize. He hosts the syndicated program America's Black Forum and is a regular panelist on Fox News Sunday. Welcome, Juan Williams, to the Coffee House.
Nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So, my pleasure. Thurgood Marshall Revolutionary Household.
This is an interesting question because I get lots of people who say to me, how can someone who rises to the pinnacle of the American establishment, the Supreme Court of the United States, possibly be a revolutionary figure? And what I say is, in fact, if you think of a child who's born in Baltimore, Maryland, 1908, and born under the law of separate but equal, Plessy v. Ferguson, that said, you know, black and white citizens were to be treated separately but equally. Of course, we know it was separate and very unequal.
Right.
And then you think about this same child becoming a person who, by the middle of the century, engineers a literal revolution. It says, has the Supreme Court saying, separate but equal is wrong and unconstitutional, and from now on, we're going to have equal, integrated treatment of our citizens without regard to race. That, to my mind, is a revolutionary accomplishment. But, you know, it doesn't stop there. You could say also that it goes on in terms of his life then breaking barriers as the first black Solicitor General of the United States, the first African American to sit on the Supreme Court, and the person who, when sitting on the Supreme Court, argues that the Constitution that had allowed for slavery, that had allowed for Jim Crow legal discrimination, segregation of people, is also a Constitution that had to be sufficiently color conscious to allow for racial remedies, such as affirmative action. Remember, he's the guy up on the court who's saying this is possible, this should be legal. He's the one who's there, in addition, saying that women, he's very instrumental in this, women should have the right to have a choice about abortion. He's the one who's up there saying you should have a right to read whatever you want or look at whatever movie you want in your home without people judging it to be obscene. He's the one who's saying that immigrants have rights, prisoners have rights, children have rights. It's an incredible revolution that he masters on the court, so that you see, from my perspective, he has a really revolutionary life in many ways, and if you look at his impact over the course of the century, I do believe that more than anyone else, this is someone who shaped the racial landscape in America in the 20th century.
Well, would you talk about that a little bit, like the 30s and the 40s, the legal things that he influenced, how things led up to Board versus Brown?
Well, you know, what's interesting is Marshall, being a child of Maryland, wanted to go to the University of Maryland Law School.
In Baltimore, right?
In Baltimore, which is his hometown. And he had gone to Lincoln University, not far from Baltimore, in Oxford, Pennsylvania. And he comes back home, and his brother, Aubrey, who had just graduated from college, wanted to be a doctor, and the brother is already off at medical school, and the family is really low on money. So ideally, he would have gone to the state law school with the low tuition right there in Baltimore, could have walked there from his home. But the school doesn't admit people of color. So his mother has to pawn her wedding ring, her engagement ring, in order to pay for his tuition to go to Howard University Law School here in Washington. When he gets out of Howard University Law School, one of the first things he does is to find a young man by the name of Donald Gaines Murray, who had gone to Amherst, had great grades, gets him to apply to the University of Maryland. Of course, he's told that we don't accept people of color. Marshall uses that as the basis then to file suit against the University of Maryland. Much to his surprise, he wins the case right in the lower courts. He expected to lose and appeal it and appeal it and appeal it, one day hope to get to the Supreme Court, but instead he wins. Well, in a sense, that victory is a template for the changes then that are to come, because he uses that victory to challenge segregation at graduate and professional schools in Missouri, in Oklahoma, in Texas, and to build all these changes. He's challenging segregation not only on the education level, he's challenging segregation in terms of restrictive covenants that kept blacks and Jews from buying property in certain neighborhoods. He's challenging segregation on the bus lines, challenging segregation in terms of white primaries in Texas, so that you can make sure that blacks, Hispanics, women have the right to vote and participate in all levels of the electoral process. And he finally, with all of these tremendous changes, I'm not even here bringing in all the criminal cases he's handling, he's got a heavy load. At the time then that he's finally come to the point where he's really broken down segregation in the graduate and professional level schools, the question becomes, what about the elementary and secondary level? And it's then that he makes this tremendous leap and says, it's not just that I'm saying that the schools are separate and not equal and you've got to do more to build up the black schools. He's saying, hey, look, segregation itself is wrong, it's unconstitutional, and we shouldn't have it for the elementary and secondary level. And it's a big risk because Marshall was really a tactician, if you will, looking to have just minute increments of gain in the law and then using that as precedent to create the next gain. Here he's not doing it step by step. Now he's taking a big jump, and the big jump is it's illegal, it's unconstitutional. It goes before the Supreme Court, and the court rules in 1954, May 17th, that Thurgood Marshall and his lawyers at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund are right. Unanimously, they say segregation in the field of public education is unconstitutional.
Right.
It was a sea change in American life. I think you can ask historians, you can ask psychologists, you can ask sociologists about the key moment in American history in the century, and they say, oh, Brown.
However, you know, after that, in the 60s, in the late 50s too, when Martin Luther King got started with sit-ins, and he had some problems with that.
He sure did. You know, one of the things we just talked about, you know, his success, Marshall's success in so many areas, is actually involves King, because don't forget, when King has the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955, after the 54 Brown case, it's Marshall that represents King's group as they try to end segregation on the bus lines, and it's Marshall who wins the victory that allows for a successful completion to the Montgomery bus boycott. Of course, all the reporters run over to King and say, hey, you're the winner, you know? But Marshall, of course, felt, hey, wait a second, I was the one who won the case in the Supreme Court. And later, reporters asked King, could you have used your nonviolent social protest techniques to change the schools, to desegregate the schools? And King says, yes, you know, it could do anything. Boy, when that hits Marshall's ears, he explodes. His ego is offended because he thinks, I've been raising money, engaged in legal strategizing, bringing in the best minds from around America's law schools. And this guy thinks he can just show up, and he says to the reporters, Marshall does, that would have been like sending a boy on a man's mission to ask King to break down segregation in the public schools.
So he was bitter about that, and he was friendly with J. Edgar Hoover. Which
is a real surprise in the book for the first time, because I've got some FBI files open. You can see how this relationship germinates and what it flowers into. And I think it's been a concern for people who've seen the book. They say to me, how can he have been friends with Hoover, who's famous for revealing secrets about King's sex life and all the rest of it? But in fact, Marshall and Hoover had something in common, which is a concern over communism. Marshall did not want the segregationists to be able to say that the NAACP was a front for communist activity. Hoover wanted to know who in the NAACP might have ties to any left-wing communist socialist groups, and so they began to share information. And in fact, the relationship continued even as Marshall became Solicitor General. It's one of the reasons that it's interesting, Hoover never attacked Marshall in the way that he attacked King.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's what's so interesting to me about Marshall in general is these paradoxes in his life, and the relationships that he had with both camps always. You know, he would understand both camps and be able to play them against each other.
It's really true. You know, he had lunch with the guy who argued against Brown, you know, the segregationist John Davis, who was arguing against him. He could go and have lunch with him.
And would like him, and he would play the whole Southern boy thing.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Go out drinking and whatever. And we only have a few minutes left, but with the Supreme Court also, I mean, who confirmed him? It was Black, who was, am I getting that
That's right? Hugo Black, who was a former Klansman, who swears him in. I mean, talk about ironies, you know. Here's the first African-American on the court, and there he is with Hugo Black. And I find there's so many interesting twists to Marshall's life. I think that's why, for me, I worked on this book for a long time, but I think that's why the book is a joy in a sense. This is not a static character, and he's not a predictable character, and he does things that you're kind of puzzled by, you're kind of upset by, then you're thrilled by. You say, oh my gosh, look what a determined, wonderful man this is. And you say, well, why was he with Hoover? Or how can he hang out with certain people, or why does he do certain... He is a fascinating, fascinating character study.
Extremely complicated, complex man, you know, and then with Clarence Thomas's nomination, how he felt about that.
Oh, well, you know, you can imagine. I mean, I think you can make some judgments there, because Thomas is anti-affirmative action, pro-death penalty, anti a woman's right to choose on abortion, all kind of polar of the positions Marshall had advocated his entire life. So he initially is very taken aback, but then as he sees the Anita Hill charges being made, and he sees this kind of show on television, a soap opera, he is repulsed. He thinks, oh my gosh, look at this demeaning spectacle. This is not what a confirmation should be for any Supreme Court justice. But maybe also on a personal level he thinks, you know what, if my hearings had been televised in 1967 with people charging that he was communist, that he was lazy, that he drank too much, he said, oh my God, the public would have turned against me. So from that instant, he has this flash of sympathy, I think, for Thomas.
Yeah, and to his credit, I think.
Well, and then he allows Thomas to come up and meet with him, and they talk, and he never blasts Thomas in the press, which, I mean, imagine, you know how vulnerable Thomas has been, because he's obviously been tarred as this monster.
Right.
If Marshall had blasted him early on, that really would have sunk Thomas.
Well, and also to compare Thomas et al. With Marshall. I mean, Marshall had to have been somewhat insulted by that, but to not let him know, to instead be friendly, and
he was very generous. And in fact, for this book, you know, I got to talk to so many of the justices, including Rehnquist and Scalia, conservatives, who said they thought Marshall was so gracious in allowing Thomas to come and sit and talk and creating the sense of family in the Supreme Court rather than division between two people who could easily have sort of been at loggerheads.
How lovely. Oh, that's really, really great. Well, thank you so much for running out of time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Afraid we've run out of time. Thanks to author Juan Williams for joining me in the Coffee House. I'm Lisa Page, and this has been Writer's Block.
That's it for the February edition. See you next month in the Coffee House.